Juliet, did anybody say they weren't coming?
No, I didn't get any emails, no.
So I counted, it looks like we still need 8 people for a quorum.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nicole, for that 5-week class, which y'all met every day?
No, so it's actually an online class, so that's the other
Oh.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have it set up where they have class on Wednesday and Friday, or at least that's when assignments are due.
So when is the 5 weeks over?
June 25th.
Oh, that's right, coming up.
Mhm. So part of their assignment is to review the comprehensive plan, so,
Oh, wow, okay.
yeah.
Hello to all.
Hello.
Jarvis, how are you?
Good. How are you all?
Good, thanks.
Tiffany, I couldn't get to you earlier.
We have 2 minutes before we go live, before the meeting start.
Great. Okay.
Sorry about that. I thought I turned that off. I did turn that on. How do I do this? Up top.
1 minute before the meeting start. Hi, Mr. Snail. I'm glad to know that you got the invite, okay?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
You're just one person away from a quorum.
Now, we did change the agenda. We're gonna let the housing authority, we're gonna ask the housing authority to go first.
It's now 6 o'clock.
Good thing I was on time.
I think I'll give it 1 more minute, Juliet.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I want to call the meeting of the Thursday, June 9 Affordable Housing Implementation Committee to order. We are hoping to have a special guest later, and I'll let you know. I did want to mention that Stella Adams unfortunately has had to resign for health reasons, and we'll talk about vacancies later in the meeting. But thank you all for coming. The first thing is roll call. Juliet?
Levon Barnes, Laura Beatty, Cal Balsaman, Diane Katati,
Here.
Lucia Constantine, S. Nicole Diggs,
Present.
Tiffany Elder,
Here.
Courtney James, I. Jarvis Martin.
Here,
Here.
sorry, this is Courtney.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Rita Aura McDaniel, John Parker,
I'm here.
okay, Venus Sanders,
Here.
Timothy Stallman,
Here.
Angela D. Vic Lewis. Roll call is complete.
Thank you, Juliet. Next is to review the agenda and ground rules. And I believe you can all see the agenda on your screen. We've made some minor adjustments, but we'll go over the ground rules. We'll approve the minutes of both the March 3rd and the May 5th meeting. We do have a quorum. Then we will hear updates from the Durham Housing Authority, followed by the Community Development Department's financial report. We'll talk a little bit more about subcommittee engagement. And then if we have any attendees, we'll have public comment and wrap up. So thank you again for joining us. Juliet, can you pull up the ground rules again?
Yes.
Okay, so we've been doing this a while now, but please show respect for others and opinions. Presume goodwill. Be fully present. We'll have just one speaker at a time for our virtual calls, and please remain muted until called upon. And committee members can raise their hand to speak. We will do public comment later, and comments in the chat will be reviewed and addressed as feasible, sometimes between meetings. We've been able to get to them lately. And please, in your comments, use specific examples and enjoy the process. So next up is Tiffany with the 2 minutes for March and May.
Okay, and we do have a quorum. So first, are there any amendments to the March 3rd meeting minutes? And if not, do we have a motion to vote and approve these?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving March 3rd, 2022 as submitted, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes approved for March 3rd, moving to May 5th. Are there any amendments to the May 5th minutes? Okay, do we have a motion to approve May 5th as written?
So move.
Second?
I can second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the the May 5th meeting minutes as submitted, please vote aye.
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 Any opposed? My brain. Okay, May 5th meeting.
Juliet, Courtney seconded the second one.
Okay,
Perfect.
thanks, Tiffany. All right, we'll go straight to Durham Housing Authority staff for your updates. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So we will proceed with our updates, and as per usual with the last really since the pandemic started here, we've been giving you updates on what's been happening with our rental situation for a lot of our families who've been struggling to pay rent during the pandemic. Next slide, please, Juliet. Next one. So the program, which we call a Fresh Start, was designed to make sure that we could prevent unnecessary evictions due to people's inability to pay rent, particularly because there's been impacted by the pandemic of 2020. Next, you can go and click all the rest of these, please, Juliet. So most of this you've actually seen already. It's showing you what the updates are for the various rental assistance programs, one being ERAP 1, which was administered by the county. All assistance payments have been received from that, from those folks that applied. And then for ERAP 2, which is administered by legal aid, we had an estimated number of 277 individuals that have applied. We've received thus far $37,000 with respect to that. The estimated amounts that were applied for were $437,000. And it is our understanding at this point that we will not receive any additional funding from that ERAP 2 program. We are working with the city on a potential way to be able to assist more families, but that is where things stand at this point. We have 418 families that have entered into repayment agreements with us. The remaining balance on those 418 families is $729,000 plus. That 277 that you see above and the 418, there is overlap with those two. So you don't add those two numbers, you deduct the sum of the 277 from the 418. We don't have the exact numbers on that yet, but it's safe to assume that most of the 277 are part of that 418 households that are currently under repayment agreements. Next slide, please. And I will turn it over to Mr. Anthony Snell, who will update us on what's been happening with our redevelopment efforts.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scott, and good evening to everyone. Hope you are doing well. I just want to spend a few moments with you this evening to update you on the progress at the J.J. Henderson Rehab and then our new construction at J.J. Henderson. As you know, and I don't know if we told you at the last meeting, we have actually branded or named the new construction at that site, the Joyce. And oh, I'm sorry. I was reading the note from someone there. I thought it was a note from me. But with respect to the Joyce, that name came from a former board member who happened to also have been a resident at McDougal Terrace, and also was the first female to complete the physician's assistance program at Duke. She was not only the first female, but of course, the first African-American female to complete the program there. So we are very honored to have the Joyce as the name of our new construction project there at J.J. Henderson. This is just a general slide of our projects that are in the DDMP. We can move forward from here. Julia. So just a quick update on the J.J. Henderson Rehab. We are moving along quite well at that site. We are anticipating completion the fourth quarter of this year. We are at reaching that 75% construction completion at the project. I think when I did this early on, I said 104, but I'm sure we are exceeding more than 104 of the units that have been completed of the 177. And then we are planning a fourth quarter ribbon cutting ceremony in which we will be extending invitations to you to join us for this event, and you will get an opportunity to tour the building and see the improvements, the actual improvements to the building. Next slide, please. I started out talking about the Joyce, which is our new construction, our all seniors new construction that's taken place there on the J.J. Henderson site. If you recall, These are 80 new units that are being built on the site. We are projecting completion the first quarter of 2023. We are now at 45% construction completion. And again, when I put this slide together, we were talking about the third floor of framing, but I think we are now on the fourth floor, and that we should be topping out the building very soon. Right now, we're trying to plan a small topping out ceremony in late June for the site. So we're making very good progress there at the J.J. Henderson, the new construction. Next slide, please. And this is just a slide showing the progress that we've made. I guess I say it every time when I see the grassy knoll there. I think back just about a year ago in August where we had the groundbreaking ceremony, and now we're coming up on almost a year, and you can see the progress that we've made in that time. And we are very proud of the work that has been done by our development partner, LSR. The other thing I want to update you on is DDMP phase 2. We're calling it phase 2. As you know, we went through the process last year and selected our development partners for Fayette Place, Forest Hill Heights, and the DHA office in the County Criminal Justice Center site. So we made those selections, and then on May the 19th, we had a developer community meeting where we invited the community in to meet our development partners and to have them to present their proposed plans for the site. We are in that process. We are now in our community engagement process for each of those sites, and we'll be sharing additional information with you on that community engagement. But this is where we are actually meeting with the residents, meeting with the community, and discussing the proposed plans for the sites, getting input into that process. And this is where we go through the process of making the adjustments to the final master plan for those sites. And that will be later on approved by our board. But this is our part of our community engagement process. Now, as some of you are aware, this is just this phase of the community engagement. The actual community engagement for the entire DDMP has been undergoing, that had started, and Mr. Scott can correct me, but I think they started this process back in 2019 or even earlier with respect to the community engagement for the DDMP. But here, since we have made our selections of the developers, we are going through another phase of that community engagement with respect to getting feedback on the exact plans for those sites.
Yeah, Anthony, we actually started our community engagement in 2016,
Okay.
much more earnestly in 17, and we had a much more focus, if you will, in 2018 as we began to take all of the feedback that we were given and crafted it into examples and plans and schemes. And then the final version of that was in 2018, where we brought folks together to kind of comment on a lot of the feedback that we received. And that led to the plan being completed in 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Next slide, please. And here is just a couple of slides showing the meeting that we had on the 19th. As you can see, we had pretty good turnout as far as the community is concerned, and we had presentations from our developers for each of the sites where they shared their vision as part of the process. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to share with you an update on the HUD Choice Neighborhood implementation finalist interview. Well, we had that interview today. So please forgive me if I'm stumbling a little bit, because we were probably exhausted from starting an interview process this morning at 9:30 and ending at approximately 3:30 today. Well, we are happy to report that at this particular point that we are one of five finalists that have been selected for the Choice Neighborhood grant for this current fiscal year. So the interview process is underway. We were the second of the 5 selected finalists to be interviewed, and that took place today. And as we reported out earlier with respect to this Choice Neighborhood initiative, our lead participants in this process include Durham Housing Authority. Of course, we were the lead applicant along with the City of Durham. We have Downtown Durham, Inc. They are our neighborhood implementation entity, Lowell Street Residential, our housing implementation entity, and Durham Children's Initiative is our people's implementation entity. We applied for $40 million. There's approximately 218 million available for this funding cycle. Just to give you some idea of what we're proposing to allocate those funds towards if we are successful, our housing strategy with 519 East Main and Liberty being our targeted site. We're proposing to invest $22.6 million into our housing strategy. Our neighborhood strategy, which consists of critical community investments, and there are 5 primary community investments. We're talking about $6 million there. For the people's strategy, $6 million, and for the administration fees and costs and relocation, $5.4 million. So along with the city today and a number of our community partners, and the mayor participated and the city manager this morning in the interviews that started at 9:30. We had a full day with HUD presenting further details regarding our plan and fleshing out some questions and responding to questions that they had regarding our plan. I would say overall today was a success. The process is ongoing. We are hoping to receive some positive indications sometime late summer, maybe August or September, on the outcome of today. Mr. Scott, you may have some further color you want to add to this process.
No, sir, nothing new to add. We think that we did the best that we could on our proposal. I feel like we got very good feedback from HUD team. So we just hope that the results of today leads us to a positive outcome.
I saw a couple of questions that pop up, Anthony. Do they want us to respond to them, or?
Sure. Okay. Speak a little bit more about the neighborhood and people strategy efforts. So go ahead, Anthony, you can take those.
So on the, hopefully I'll recall all of them. Mr. Johnson, maybe you can help me too. There are approximately 5 CCCs, I'm going to say, critical community investment strategies that we landed on with the assistance of the city. Those investments included, help me out, Mr. Scott. I know we have basically a street improvement initiative coming from the Hayti community for approximately.
So Anthony, let me jump in a second. I think it'll be good to set the stage for what the Choice Neighborhoods Grant is and how it's different. So the focus of this, as was said earlier, was around the 519 East Main Street and the Liberty Street apartment site. The beauty of a Choice Neighborhoods Grant, as its name indicates, is it's about more than just the site. So those 2 components that you heard about, the people component and the neighborhood component, are the ones that essentially take us outside of just money to help support the housing development. So with respect to the people component, there is a plan to provide ongoing interaction, engagement, and assistance with the families on its site for at least up to 6 years. And that's part of what that $6 million would go towards. Our lead partner on that is the Durham Children's Initiative. That organization will be the lead on that. They have a whole host of partners, all of which they currently work with their DCI program in general, but they're specifically going to be a partner with us on our families on this site. With respect to the neighborhood component, as Anthony was mentioning, there are 5 different components to that. But one of the key aspects of this is how do we connect the downtown area to the Hayti community? And that's an important aspect of this. And frankly, we got a very strong reaction from HUD as we talked about this that we thought was very, very positive. So it gets at, the ongoing challenge of how do you connect Hayti to the rest of downtown? How do you connect Hayti to, Black Wall Street? So there is funding being set aside to help with improvement of the Fayetteville Street corridor, particularly going up to at least to the Hayti Heritage Center. There's funding placed in there to provide facade improvements to the Hayti Heritage Center, as well as an additional pot of money going towards the Hayti Heritage Center. What was it? I think it was 250 for that. I can't recall what that was. What was that? Was the interior improvements? So all told, there's about $750,000 of the grant that would be spent specifically on the Hayti Heritage Center. There's a portion of the funding that would go towards improving that and creating a much more pedestrian-friendly connectivity from Hayti to crossing the 147 freeway. And that's it, sort of big picture in terms of what that's for. And we can provide you with more details at the next meeting. I don't want to misstate some of our things. And both Anthony and I are a little wore out from today and actually the prep leading up to today. So rather than trying to fumble through it, I think we can come back and give you more details at the next meeting. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much. That is exciting news. All the best with that. Before we move on, Juliet, I just wanted to mention we have several committee members that have joined us: Lavon, Lucia, Rita, Angela, and Laura. Laura's having trouble getting into the panelists email, but she's on as an attendee via phone. And then also, I'm pleased to mention that the newest Durham City Council member, Monique Hulsey-Hyman, has joined us. And Monique, if you're available, we'd love to have you make a few remarks or give you a few minutes to just say hi to the committee. But thank you for joining us.
Yes, hello. I am so sorry. I'm trying to get my video to work, but we just got out of a council meeting. I'm actually still in my office at City Hall because I knew I couldn't get home and get to this meeting. So I'm trying to work out my video because for some reason my video is not working. But I want to just say thank you so much for having me this evening, and I am looking forward to working with this committee.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to working with you as well.
Madam Chair, can I chime in real quick?
Yes, please.
Dr. Hyman is being very generous out here. She is a former CAC member, so I need to represent that as the chair. Just want to put that out there.
Great.
And I'm no longer formal because I've been appointed that committee, so I'm back on. So good to see you. Thank you. And looking forward to working with some more.
Good. Before we move on, are there any other questions for Anthony or Anthony? Okay, hearing none. At this point, we'll move to the Community Development Department and we get to talk about the long-awaited city financial report. So thank you, Reginald. You're on mute.
Hope everybody's doing well. And I was in the same meeting that the Asnies were in, so it's been a long day, but we're going to keep pressing on as we do to serve our community. And I do want to say that the Housing Authority did an excellent job today in representing Durham, and so as we proceed, I'm optimistic. But going to the task at hand, if you remember, the task at hand was to share with the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee the financial report. We've been working on that for quite some time, and so I'm glad to be able to share it. I had elected not to prepare a separate PowerPoint and have the financial report. I'm just going to speak from the financial report. But I do have a few comments to make. Of course, you see this, it can be intimidating for some because it's aligned with a lot of words and even more numbers. But it's actually relatively simple. We're going to kind of talk through it. And the first thing I want to do is orient orientate everyone to the document and do a little bit of refresher before we begin. And so just to recap, if everyone will remember, and would impart the genesis for the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee, the City Council basically approved a $160 million, $159 million affordable housing plan. The cornerstone of that plan was a $95 million bond referendum that went before the voters and passed with 76% of the vote. So the resources that we had were the bond referendum with $95 million. And then we had 5 years, because it was a 5-year plan, 5 years of entitlement funding. What that means is that 5 years of funding from Community Development Block Grant, 5 years of funding from the Housing Opportunities with AIDS, HOPWA, persons with AIDS, 5 years of funding with Emergency Solution Grants, and 5 years of funding with Home Investment Partnership Funds. All those come from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. There were 5 years of funding from the Dedicated Housing Fund that we generate locally. And then there were the operating costs from the funds from the general fund that fund the operation. So when you add all those together with the bond referendum, over 5 years, you come up with $159 million. I'm gonna round up and say 160. And so $160 million, that's the affordable housing plan. And so what I'm going to do is show you where that is so we can all get orientated to that on this sheet. So what you have going across the top is you have this first column that says original budget, and then you have some other columns. I'm going to talk about those later, but then that's going across. But then if you look going down, you have the various categories. And so if you remember that with the $159 million, it was divided into several categories of funding that were used in various areas. So on this spreadsheet, they're actually kind of color coded. And so what we're going to do is first, we're going to find $160 million to start, and then we'll go from there. So Juliet, if you go back to the top, and then look in everyone sees the original budget column, and then you see the categories. So the first category in green here is homelessness. Scroll down slowly, Juliet. Okay, then you see that there's a category, a subcategory, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing total. And that was one of the categories in the bond. And you can see we projected to spend, there was a projection when we created the bond referendum to spend $3.4 million. Then we had another category of homeless system investments. The amount of money we thought at the time, and remember we passed the bond in 2019, we discussed the bond, and it started in the beginning of 2019, the late 2018. And there was a committee that worked on it before it went to over the summer, before it went to the voters in late 2019 and November 2019. So these are those dollars that we're talking about. Then there was another technical category, technical assistance and capacity building with $300,000. And then there was HOPWA assistance, $1.3 million. Those were the categories under homelessness. And the homelessness grand total was basically $10.4 million. That's what we thought we would do. That was our goal, to be able to spend that over 5 years. I'm gonna go into the next category just to give another example, is multifamily rental. In multifamily rental, we had category downtown revitalization and the support for the Durham Housing Authority. And you've been getting updates on that project, those projects, but that was a total of $58 million. So if you remember, we talked about $58 million of the bond referendum would go to support the work of the Housing Authority. And so that's where that number is $59 million. Then there was another category, downtown plan acceleration, a new low income, 4% low income housing tax credits. That was a total of $16 million. And then there was another category of multifamily production and preservation, and that was $25 million. And preservation outreach was $360 million, for a total of the plan for multifamily was $100 million over 5 years. And if one will remember when we started this plan, that our goal was to produce housing for the most need. That's the reason we were helping those and those who reside in public housing or otherwise impacted by the work of the housing authority. Then we go to the next category, which was neighborhood stabilization. And then under neighborhood stabilization, we had the small category, small scale production and preservation, which was $7.5 million. And remember, small scale in neighborhoods dealt with, for units that were less than 6, some single family homes, a range of things that were smaller and impacted neighborhoods and were not big apartment complexes. Then we had home repair and rehabilitation at $4.6 million. And then we had what we call property tax outreach and homeowner education at $650,000. And then eviction diversion was $2.3 million. And then we had the employment pilot was basically $2.5 million for a total of just under $24 million for neighborhood stabilization. Then the next big bucket category was leveraging financing pilots. And we had the Durham Affordable Loan Fund. That was one category under that, in that bucket, that was $1.5 million. And then the preservation, naturally occurring affordable housing and accessory dwelling units, $3.5 million over 5 years. And so the leveraging financing pilot grand total was $5 million. The next category is labeled salaries operating in the Section 108 loan. And these are more administrative costs that we knew we had to incur. And so that comes to a total of $16.5 million. And so when you have that 16.5 and the bond issuance cost, which is just the cost of administering the bond and the Section 108 loan over 5 years, you come up with a grand total for the salaries operating cost and Section 108 loan of $20 million. And that, when you add all that together, that's $159 million. So that's the foundation of where we are. Are any questions at that point before I go further?
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for explaining the budget sheet better. This loan, property loan and the housing bond came out before COVID, correct?
That's correct. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So has there been a cost? Would you say we've spent more than the budget allowed since COVID? Or is it the same amount of money that was allocated before COVID?
No, I would say just like everything else, we've been impacted, and we've talked about that earlier, but I'm gonna talk about it here. Haven't gotten to that part yet. But the answer to your question is absolutely. The categories and the expenditures, and I haven't talked about expenditures yet, are impacted by COVID and will even more so be impacted by COVID in the future. If you remember, I talked about in a presentation that we had some projects that are having to deal with cost overruns because of increasing costs and increasing interest rates. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, so with the cost of living rising, wouldn't that impact it more?
Oh, absolutely. And this is how it happens, because it's simple. It's just as simple. The more things cost, the less you can purchase with that amount of money, because it's more.
So how will that impact between COVID and the cost of living impact the budget as a whole? Will we have to borrow money from somewhere else in order to keep the money to where it should be?
No, we won't have to borrow any more money. What we will have to do is we probably will have to do less than what we originally planned. And that's what this that's what this chart will reflect when I finish working through it.
So if we have to do less, and we already have several projects planned, and we have to maybe cut out one or two, how will those get paid for in the future? Or will we have to ask for another housing bond?
We may have to ask for another housing bond or come up with additional resources out of the 159 million. The 159 million is fixed. That's a fixed number.
So it's not going to go up or down?
It's going to be fixed at 159 million. Fortunately, we do have some money that's not in this plan, but for this conversation, we can't adjust it up unless we get some money from somewhere else.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'll talk about some projects, but generally the point is, what can we get and what are we going to get from what we originally planned? What we originally planned was in 2018, approved in 2019. Before we even heard of a thing called, well, at least for me, a thing called COVID-19 and all its impacts and the economy and all that. And so we've had to deal with 2 years of that in the midst of that. And so, yes, it has an impact. Okay. So now we know the budget that we had planned during the time 2018, 2019, and what document that you have in front of me shows where we are, to that point. So what you have, this column called revised budget. So this column, and I'm just going to do homelessness. I'm not going to go line by line. But the point about this category is that when we decided, we didn't know each category to be able to create this budget. But you have this column. And so this is just a breakdown of of the revised budget. And that's what the column is, and it has more detail because you see families moving forward in line 1A, 87,000. And this is actually entities and money that goes to those entities for them to provide services. So it's more detail. When we had the plan, we only had a number, and then we needed to fill it out, as we started work and have started plans, making plans and providing services. So that's what the detail is on column G. Now, if you look at column L is what we call the actuals. Well, actuals mean the dollars that have actually been spent as of February 28, 2022. And the reason we use that date, that's the date we prepared the report. We have to do pick a date, and because we're constantly spending, and you could run a report like this or try to prepare a report every day because money is going out. But this is the date that we use because we were actually in the budget process. And so we had to have a cutoff. And so what's in that column is actual money that's, and the reason you call it actuals because it's actually been dispersed. Is everybody with me on that? Okay. Then we go to the next column is the budget. This is the budget for FY22. This is the current year. The fiscal year for the city runs from July 1 to June 30th every year. And this is what we budgeted to spend. This is not what we spent for this year. And then the end of the budget year, if fiscal year, excuse me, is coming up in a couple of weeks. So this is the project, what we budgeted to spend. And then what we're going to do, we're going to have actuals after we close the year out. What did you actually spend? Okay. Then the next column is the projected budget for FY23. So the FY23 year starts on July 1 this year, of July 1, 2022. That's when the FY23 year starts and runs to June 30th. This is what we're going to project. And this is just a projection saying that what we're going to do and in what categories and with what organizations that we're going to spend. And it's also based on how much money we have left from what we've already spent. Because remember, it's fixed, as I mentioned when I was asking, who asked the question? Miss McDaniels? Who asked that question? And I was saying that the amount of money that was fixed is fixed. So you can't add any more money to it. You have to only deal with, still have to balance out at $159 million. So Juliet, if you would go back up. And then, but because this is a projection, what we're trying to do is do a projection on what can we get for the 159 million. Knowing we started in 2018, the budget was approved, the bond was approved in 2019. The official year started in 2019 that we're starting counting on July 1. And the question is, what will we get in what spending that we will have left, what money we have left? And so what you see here is the next year, FY20, fiscal year 25, which starts on July 1, 2024 and runs through June 30th of 2025, what we would project to spend in that year. And then you have the grand totals. And if you look at the grand totals, and Juliet, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you see the 159 million. That's what I mean when I was sharing with Ms. McDaniels that the number was fixed. So this is after 2025. That's was spent sorry, get a little tongue tag, $159 million, $160 million. Okay. Did I lose anybody with what I just shared? Okay, Juliet, if you wouldn't mind going to the multifamily category.
Is that the one you want? We're still on the same spreadsheet?
Yeah, we're still on the same spreadsheet.
Okay.
So the first thing that I want to look at is multifamily. It starts with multifamily rental. Okay.
There you are.
All right. So we're going to do a little walkthrough on this one. I'm going to ask Ms. Lotto to assist a little bit so we can talk about this one in details, because this gets to Ms. McDaniel's question a little bit. So we're going to start with the first work with the Housing Authority. Remember that we had $59 million for the Housing Authority in downtown revitalization. And this starts with line 10A. And that was a go. We just knew it was $58 million. Now, as we have moved forward, you see that the one sees that we then began to work with the Housing Authority, and you heard reports on that and define what was that going to actually look like. We kind of had some ideas when we started, but this is what the detail looks like. And so when you look at the revised budget, you actually see different projects. These are actual projects: Commerce Street Family Apartments, Commerce Street Seniors, Durham Housing Authority, we actually should have put the list name there. DHA Headquarters Criminal Justice. And these are parts of the DDNP that they were just talking about. The Main Street Bridge Loan, Dillard Street Project. The rest of the DDNP is you see that 19 million. And then Elizabeth Street and JJ Henderson Senior, $256,000. So,
Mr. Johnson, can I
yes,
interrupt just
yes,
for
sir, please go
clarification?
ahead.
I just want to make it clear, because the way it's labeled, it might be confused that is where it says DHA Headquarters Criminal Justice. That's the site. That's not that money is going to a headquarters for DHA.
That's correct.
Right. That is just the name of the site. So for everybody who may not know, that is not to build a headquarters for DHA. It is to build housing on our headquarters site, along with the land that surrounds the criminal justice building.
That's correct. That's correct. And so when you look at that, based upon as of February the 28th, we had spent $2.9 million at that juncture. That was the actual. Now, we've talked about how we have different plans that are underway and things that are under contract or that in development. But this is actually money that, what I share with people, that's actually walked out the door. So you can plan to spend a lot of money in different things, but until it walks out the door, it's not expended. That's what the 2.9 million means. And then when you look at column M, that is the projection of the budget for FY23. And then you see for the next year, that's actually what we project to spend on these various projects, because what's going on is they're in development under the early years, and now they're actually going to be underway. And we think that they'll be underway in expended money. So that's the reason we have to project that we're going to spend that money in that year. And then you see in FY, the next year is $12 million, and the next year is 28 million. And they'll be doing more work during that time. And of course, all of that's projection to see, how things are, depending on how things are going. And then you see after the 5 years, you get to the $58 million that we started with. That was something somebody's raising their hand for a question.
Reginald, I did, this is Karen. I just wanted to jump in and clarify a point.
Please.
That for the projections, the numbers when it comes to the housing are actually the years that we expect to commit the funds into actual projects.
That's right.
The expenditure will happen over a couple of years after that. And that's one of the important things with housing, because any deal is like a 3-year cycle roughly. We commit in year 1, and which means we have a contract. And then we'll actually see units typically in year 3.
Correct.
So could someone explain to me what FY23 means? Is that the year?
So
FY23 is that next year?
So FY23 means fiscal year 2023. It begins on July 1, 2022, and it runs through June 30th, 2023.
Now, is there a certain amount of things that's supposed to be finished in that year? Or is that where the money's going to be spent?
So in this particular chart, that's what Ms. Lotto was just saying. On the out years, it's when the money is committed. That means if I'm doing a project, I have to have all my money up front. And that's the year that I'm getting that money.
Okay.
And that's the distinction that she was making. It wasn't the year that the money is expended. That means it walks out the door.
So Reginald, this is Terry Porter Holmes, the fiscal assistant director in the department. So Reginald, I think probably what happened, once you go over to the matrix spreadsheet, that will answer the question that I can't remember who was just speaking. That would answer the question, because if I heard it correctly, it seemed like they're looking to see when are we gonna see it and what will we get? And I think that will show on the matrix spreadsheet. This here is all about money and what's budgeted.
Thank you. So I was just sharing, so Terry is correct. And the what she's talking about is that the other sheet that you have deals with the number of units that you get in a particular year when that is gone, but that's a different document. Right now, we're only working with dollars. This is all about dollars. Okay, let's go, Juliet, let's go to the next category, which was it's still in multifamily, but this is downtown revival, I'm sorry, downtown plan acceleration and new. So at the time, we thought we allocated 2018, 2019, $16 million for this category. This category was designed because we thought that there might be the possibility, depending upon how things go, that we might need to accelerate the DDMP, the downtown plan, and we might need resources to help support the housing authority, or also we may need resources to do 4% low-income housing tax credits. Most of the low-income tax credits that we've talked about previously were 9%. And basically the difference between the two is that the locality needs to come up with more money itself for 4%. With 9%, you have to come up with less money. And there's a major difference between the two. That's the difference. And so we have not been doing 4% because we have not had money to have 4% low-income housing tax credits. And this was designed as a bucket to be able to do that. As it turns out, if you look at the projects that are listed here, it's a list of projects that are 4% and 9%. Well, 4%, I'm sorry. And you've seen these before, but I'm gonna ask Ms. Lotto to kind of run through these and refresh everybody's memory on the projects that we have here.
Yes, sir. So if you start at line, row 68 or line 12A, Ashton Place, that is the second phase. If you recall the Willard Street Apartments, thank you, Juliet. This is the second phase that's being built on the remaining parcel of land next to the bus station. I believe it's 51 units for seniors. The second Farrington Road Apartments is 80 units being built out in southwest Durham on Farrington Road, hence the name, or near Farrington Road by Laurel Street Residential. That's a new construction project. That's actually being built on a parcel of land donated by a market rate developer. Hardy Street Apartments is 132 units of new construction rental in East Durham. The RFP there you see is actually 4 projects that we are in the process of making funding commitments to. That total, I'd have to do the math, but I think it's somewhere around 400 and some units, 500 units, somewhere in there. Those are all 4% new construction deals. And then the last 2 projects are essentially a combination of a 9% tax credit and a 4% tax credit on a parcel of land that the city owns in Southside adjacent to the first 2 phases of multifamily. And that will yield 100 units of affordable housing.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate allowing me to get me a sip of water while you were doing that. So thank you. So I would say the distinction between the F and the G column. Remember the G column is what we planned, and then the G column is what is actually turned out. We didn't know these were going to be the exact projects. You know, at the time we came up to $16 million. And what it's actually turned out is that we have projected that we would spend more money because one, we needed to produce more units. And then some people had some good projects and we were able to get these projects underway in different forms. And so that amount of money increased. But of course, when you have a fixed amount, that means it needs to come from somewhere. Okay. But then we talked about what did we actually spend to date is $410,000. And then in FY 22, we budgeted $1.1 million. And then you begin to see, based upon when these projects will start, when they need the money committed, that's what you see in the projections. So some projects will start right away. Some projects will start in 2 years. Some will start in a year. Some you will start in 3 years. It depends upon the complexity of the project and when the other funding will be ready, because our funding is just one piece of the funding for the entire project. It's not the entire project itself. And so you see that in this category, we project to commit money in 24 and 25 at 8 million and 15 million. And then you see the total there, 35 million, that's in column G. And that means that you're running a deficit in that category, meaning you spent more money than you said of about 19 million. Well, I say spent and committed, because it's not just spent because you hadn't spent it, but you also say projecting you're gonna commit. So I'm gonna pause there for questions. Did I lost anybody?
I had wanted to ask a question on the South Side
Yes.
project. I know a couple of months ago, you said that the project was a possibility being put on hold because of the parking. So are you saying now that that project will be going underway?
So no, I can't say that it will be underway. And I'm not remembering that I shared that it was going to be on hold because of parking. The reason, what the project is, and the posture of the project is submitted a tax credit application for a 9% tax credit. That just went in May, at the beginning of May. And we won't know until August if the application will be successful. If the application is successful, for the 9%, then the project can proceed. And it was 2 projects. The site is one site, but it's 2 projects. One for a total of 100 units. One has 60 units, and the other one has 40 units. But it's gonna look like it's one project with a total of 100 units.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And so what we have to do is, even though they have not been successful, and this, I'm glad you asked that question, actually, because it caused me to bring up another point, is that the city council has to commit money to that project and show the part of the application that the city is committed. That's the reason we have to have the money committed up front and show that we have the money. So in the event they are considered and are accepted, that they have the money to proceed from us on our portion. There's some other portions they have to get. But we have to have, anytime we say that we're going to do something, we have to have all the money up front, basically. Okay. So I think, I've spent quite a bit of time talking, and we don't have to try to go through all of this. But I think, Diane, I know you had some questions.
I did. Thank you, Reginald. I really appreciate this. And folks, when you review this in more detail, if you have questions, feel free to email Tiffany and I or Reginald directly, and we can try to respond to those. Reginald, I had a question that I had shared with you earlier from Jim Svara about the CDD OEWD DHA employment pilot. The revised budget shows roughly 2.5 million. and it shows projected budget in FY24 and FY25. So is that the answer, that has been postponed? Or is that when work will begin? And to your point about units, when it's actually training and people, does that occur in the year that it's projected as opposed to any lag?
A good set of questions. I'm going to ask Ms. Lotto to respond to that, but I would also share that this is an example of something that's been impacted by COVID. Karen.
Yes, sir. So first, to answer your last question first, because this is a services, the year that it's shown as projected is the year that we expect to spend it. Right now, we have been working with our colleagues at the Office of Economic and Workforce Development to develop a construction training program to try to take advantage of some of the construction work that is happening that's being funded by the city through Forever Home Durham. That project has been kind of very slow moving and was really put on hold during the pandemic because the pandemic resulted in a great big limitation on the ability to do group training. We are just now picking that back up and are entering into a contract with the state and the North Carolina Home Builders Association to provide 2 training courses a year that will give opportunities for 16 people to be trained. And then OEWD and the city will provide sort of follow-on support with employment to folks who go through that training program. In addition, we are also, OEWD is in the process of identifying and contracting with a couple of vendors who will also provide additional construction-related training and then kind of follow-on employment support after that. So we expect to start seeing people going through training classes next fiscal year. So actually we hope to start spending money sooner than we have shown in these projections, but we were taking a conservative approach. And then to continue spending and training people for the next 3 years.
Diane, does that answer your question?
Oops. Yeah, sorry, I was on mute and speaking. So thank you, Karen. That's very helpful. I guess the question is, if people are particularly interested in watching training, is it best that they look for updates quarterly or that they write directly to you for additional information?
Once we have training up and going in a real way, we will be posting updates definitely on the website. And we will certainly be posting training opportunities on the website. If people in between though want more information, I think it's always okay to reach out to ask.
Great, that's helpful. Did anyone else have questions? And otherwise, I guess we'll continue on.
Okay.
Raise hands. Okay, go ahead. Thanks.
Right, super.
I have to step up to close the door.
All right. All right. So I would Karen, if you would talk about the preservation outreach.
Yes, the preservation projects or just the outreach portion itself?
The outreach portion, just the outreach portion itself.
So the preservation outreach is another area of work that has been slow moving and somewhat impacted by the pandemic as well. The goal there is to really try to proactively identify preservation opportunity projects of 2 kinds. The first is really to get ahead of projects, currently income restricted projects that are coming towards the end of their affordability period, to begin conversations with those developers about about their interest and ability to maintain those projects as affordable going forward. And the second has been to really try to identify market rate and kind of naturally occurring affordable housing purchase opportunities. We have the Affordable Housing Loan Fund in place to really provide capital for some of those quick purchases, but it's been more of a challenge to actually identify those purchases. I will say at this point, we are just starting with some market assessment work and really trying to figure out what the scope of the opportunity is in terms of preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. The reason is there is so much private capital in the market right now in Durham that units are selling so quickly without ever and for kind of above appraised value that it is very hard to figure out how to really get a foot in the door as an affordable housing developer, and whether that is the best place to spend our energy versus trying to preserve some of the existing affordable housing that we have that is already income restricted and is potentially at risk. So we are still at the early stages of trying to figure out where to go with that. And at this point have, sort of a limited pool of capital to deploy. So we're going to have to make some decisions in the coming year about which direction we're going in.
Thank you. So if you look at the line 20 on the multi-family rental grand total, you see there was $100 million. We talked about the original budget. And because of the projects that we have, it comes up to 106 million. And then if you go all the way to the last column, next to the last column, you see it 106 million total that is the revised budget. And you see the difference between the original and the revised budget is negative 16 million. That means you're over 6 million in that category. And that's what the projection is over the life of the 5 years. So next we'll go to the neighborhood stabilization. And Juliet, how am I on time?
Yeah, about 7 more minutes. I'm keeping up.
All right. We will just work until my time. And then we'll continue the next time. So the next is the neighborhood stabilization category. And remember, this is the category that was focused more so on neighborhoods and projects in neighborhoods. And so they had small scale production and preservation. We projected, said that we plan to spend $7.5 million over 5 years. And then when we developed the projects, we only have one project that's defined with the vendor right now, and that's with DCLT, but we're actually planning to issue some requests for proposals in future years. And so that's what you have here. So it's nothing that's actually spent to date to February 2028 of 2022. There was nothing budgeted in FY22, the current year. And then the projections you can see when we project to commit money, but those are going to be based on RFPs, requests for proposals, that will be issued at that time or near that time. And so that's what you see in that category. I would also say that this is also an area that has been delayed in part due to COVID and due to staffing challenges that we have had during and just before COVID.
5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. The next category that we have is home repair and rehabilitation. And I asked Ms. Lotto to speak to that category.
Yes, so that category includes 2 different and related activities. The first is minor repair, which are smaller repairs or for own homes owned by seniors or people with disabilities. That program was significantly impacted by COVID because we really couldn't do work during the pandemic because no one wanted people coming into their house. Even if the workers were willing to go in, people didn't want vendors coming into their homes during the pandemic. But we do now have a new contract in place with Habitat, which is our partner to do those repairs, and they are actually working very actively. In addition, Habitat is also responsible for doing intake, which is to say identifying eligible households and homes for our other program, which is the Substantial Rehab program. The Substantial Rehab program is a loan program, a forgivable loan program, also for seniors and people with disabilities who may need larger scale repairs. So repairs, typically in the $20,000 to $50,000 range in order to make and keep their home habitable. And Habitat's role is to identify potential homeowners, and then the city actually works directly with those homeowners and organizes the repairs and enters into the agreement with the homeowner. We actually have our first homeowners coming through the system now, so we actually hope to start doing some of that work over the summer. But that is an area where we have been delayed both by COVID and by staffing. And so we really are, playing catch up at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Diane and Tiffany.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Being that the cost of living is still on the rise and no one has control over that, is there a possibility that AMIs could be lower? I guess I would say, lower to match people's incomes, because what people were able to afford 5 to 10 years ago with their AMI at certain levels, because the cost of living and the cost of materials and things have gone up so high that they're no longer, those same people are no longer to keep or look for housings with AMIs the same rate that they looked at them 5 or 10 years ago. So has the city or the county ever thought about lowering the AMI because of the cost of living and COVID has impacted people's income so much?
Ms. McDaniel, may I ask a clarifying question? When you say lowering the AMI, do you mean targeting resources to lower income households?
No, lowering the percentage, like you'll say hypothetically, this apartment is for 80% of a person's AMI income. Could that be lowered to match today's standards, I guess I would say? If that makes sense.
You raise a really good question, and so let me take a step back and say, so these area median income, these calculations that are given to us by the federal government. So, and they are the eligibility criteria for our federal programs, and is the language that is used in the affordable housing field to kind of define level of affordability. What is going on right now is that incomes in Durham are, when you look at what the area median income is, so what someone who earns 80% of area median income earns now, it's significantly higher than it was 5 years ago. The issue is that's not because people who were necessarily living in Durham are making a lot more money. It's that what is happening is that people who are moving into Durham in Orange County, they earn typically more than the people who were living in Durham and Orange County. And our AMI, and I say Durham and Orange County, is because the AMI that we work with is actually for the Durham Orange County metro area. Durham Chapel Hill MSA. And so we see, so what is now a 60% AMI rent is now higher because the incomes overall in the area have gone up. The problem that that's creating, I think this is what you're talking about, is that there's a whole bunch of people who've been living in Durham all through this whose incomes have not gone up. And so that what is affordable housing may not be affordable to them, because that number that is 60% AMI is creeping up because overall the area is growing, and it's growing with people who earn more money, and that's pushing our percentages of income up, but it's not necessarily helping people whose incomes are not rising. Am I tracking, Ms. McDaniel, with what you're talking about?
Yes, so my next question is, I know that the city and the county have lawyers. So why don't the lawyers get together and take it to the federal courts and say, look, people's incomes and the cost of living is not matching up with the AMIs to create affordable housings as it was once known as, but no longer is. I hope I'm making myself clear. Just a lot of thoughts are going through my head at the same time.
And I think you are, and I think so. What the city and can't do is change how the federal government defines area median income. What we can do is say, all right, we want to focus on housing for people at this area median income, 60%, 50%, 30%, whatever it is we can choose to do. We can do that knowing that the lower we go in the income spectrum, the more it will cost us per unit to house people. And the reality is, because we rely on federal programs like the low-income housing tax credit to bring subsidy into most rental housing in particular, and I'm thinking about rental housing, we really rely on the federal government for the first layer of subsidy. And then the city is the second layer of subsidy. We have to recognize that right now, the low-income housing tax credit is pegged to 60% of area median income. The state could choose to allocate credits in a way that targets lower income households. State has the latitude to do that. But the overall program is really pegged to 6% area median income. So the only thing the city can do is really try to layer in our preferences. We do that some now, where we say that any project that receives state, in order to receive city funds, you must set aside 20% of the units at 30% of area median income. I think the challenge is the number of units that are being generated at the very low end of the income spectrum are just not enough to meet the need that exists, or nowhere near enough to meet the need that exists there. And it is a challenge to increase production because both of the cost associated with those units, as well as the need that developers have to ensure that their projects cash flow and sufficiently to cover their operating costs. And typically the more very low income units you have in a property, the greater difficulty it is for the property to actually cash flow and cover its operating expenses. So there's a natural cap, usually at somewhere between 20 and 30%. So, and I'm sorry, so the answer to you is we can do more very affordable housing. We can, as the city, choose to do that. We just need to know that in doing that, we will generate fewer units, because every unit will cost us significantly more. And I hope I answered at least some part of your question.
And you did. So my next question, and I'm sorry for hogging up the meeting tonight, but there are other materials being used to build housing at a lot of cheaper costs than what we're paying for it now. So
Rita, let's save that question for a bit and try to get through this, okay? Other people also have questions. I see Tim has his hand up. Tim, I don't know if you need to jump in right now. John also has a question, but we are going to extend this conversation till at least 7:35 and drop some time out of subcommittee engagement and wrap up. But so.
Thank you, I'm finished.
Thanks, Rita.
Well, I just had a follow-up to Rita's really excellent questions, which was, and maybe for Karen, I know that so folks sort of treat the AMI as gospel truth, but you know, I don't think it's necessary that somebody at Census Bureau and at OMB is making a determination that Durham should be part of the Chapel Hill MSA for the purposes of calculating the AMI. And it would seem to me that there ought to be an appeals process for that determination. There usually is for census decisions like that, a process to go through where a municipality can go to the Census Bureau and say, actually, we don't think we should be in this MSA. Actually, we think we should have our AMI calculated separately. And a question that I've been studying with a lot in this process is, yeah, like does that process exist? What does it look like? Obviously, it might take a very long time. And it might not have a big impact, but we are continually seeing the way that Durham's AMI doesn't actually reflect the economy of Durham, and that poses a big problem for affordable housing. And it seems like there ought to be some way to petition the either HUD or the Census Bureau to change their because some counties they calculated at the county level, and some counties they calculated at the MSA level. It's different from place to place.
And so the answer would be there may be an appeal process. I would have absolutely no idea what it is and how to go about it. One thing that really drives, though, whether it's at the county level versus larger, is how big your county is. And Durham's a relatively small county. So we actually used to be with Wake County, Wake, Durham, Orange. And then they split us off from Wake because Wake got big enough to be its own thing. And so now we're sort of Wake, Durham, Chapel Hill. I don't know, to be honest, how small they will go. One of our challenges we have as a county is that we're a relatively small county. But I'm going to walk back and say the relative impact of that, because keep in mind, our AMI is rising in Durham as well. Our incomes are rising overall. The challenge that we're having is that we are layering on a whole new set of higher income people, but we're not necessarily seeing the incomes of long-term Durham residents rise. The implications for us are, the federal programs. So it's probably biggest for the low-income housing tax credit. They're going to say that projects must serve 60% of area median income, and they're going to define that based on the MSA. That's where we really do see the biggest effect in terms of affordable housing. And it's not trivial because the tax credit is our biggest source of subsidy for rental housing. The rest of it, in terms of where Durham puts its own money, including its own federal money, is not limited by by where HUD says is 80% of mine. We could choose to spend all of our money at lower incomes. It is always a trade-off, though, because one, we have to say is that we're just going to produce less because every unit is going to cost us more. The other is we can't build we can't build necessarily 100% of our units in a building at a very low income, because that building will not cash flow. And so there always has to be a balance. You always have to look at some kind of mix of incomes, even if it's between 0% and 60%, because you need the building to be healthy, because you need to be the developer that owns the building to be healthy. And so that's part of the challenge as well. But you're right. I mean, it is a real issue when it comes to the low-income housing tax credit program, that the rents that they're targeting keep rising every year because our overall income on the MSA is rising, but part of that's being driven by Durham. It's not all Orange County that's pulling us up. And I don't know enough, I can't do enough math to separate how much is, which is which.
And it is weighted. So the
Right.
relative size, because we're much larger than Orange,
That's a good
we're
point.
weighted to Durham
Yeah.
in terms of population.
Yeah, we are more than twice as big as Orange County. Orange County's income is higher than ours, but we are twice as big. So the MSA number is weighted.
Thank you both. John, did you have a question? You wanted to jump in here?
I do. It's been a really good discussion and very valuable. I think I've learned a lot. And I also, before I ask my question, I'll try to make it quick, but I just want to say what a great resource our two Anthonys and Reginald and Karen are. And thank you so much for continuing to participate in what's been a very long day. My question is basically about wiggle room, wondering how much wiggle room there may be in the budget, Reginald. There's if we're not spending a lot of money on preservation outreach or the down payment assistance program, it seems to me that, like, for preservation outreach, if we had more housing vouchers that were being used by more landlords, we're preserving the housing stock. Is there any consideration that can be given to find the wiggle room to move money from one category to another to make a difference? The down payment assistance program. Is there a way that we can support people that are on the housing vouchers to help them, support them more and have money go towards down payment assistance? That's my questions. But I saw that Bill Bell was kind of in the audience, and I'd be really, really curious to hear what he'd have to say about all this too. Thank you.
So I would say, in part of the answer is yes, we can trade off from categories, and what we're ending up doing is some of that from one category to the other. I would also share with you that we have this little thing called COVID that's in the midst of that too. And so the impact of COVID is that some money that we have and that we will need is to keep the projects, particularly the multifamily projects, going. So the wiggle room that you're talking about may actually accrue to keep those projects that are midstream going, so we can get them to face the rising costs and rising interest rates. That was part of the presentation that I shared earlier. Karen, you may have something else to add to that.
I think, Reginald, that you've covered the high points. That one, we are looking at where we think maybe we won't be using all of the funds kind of within the time period that we've given ourselves. And can we reprogram those funds? We've done a little bit of that already. We are, as Mr. Johnson's been very clear, we are facing cost increases on our projects, and we have to keep those in mind as we move forward. But we really do want to, as we get further along in the program, see where there are funds that perhaps we aren't going to utilize in the buckets where they originally were, and see if we can reprogram them to places where perhaps maybe we have fully utilized all of our funds.
Thank you. Reginald, were you going to cover any more of the chart?
Yes, I can. I was just trying to gauge, whether we get an information overload. So I'll keep going.
Okay, thanks. We'll give you another 5-10 minutes. And,
okay.
I appreciate all the questions. I think this is really important.
Absolutely. And so the next category, we talked about the home repair and rehabilitation. The next category was the property tax outreach and homeowner education. This probably falls into the category that we just talked about, and I'll ask Ms. Lotto to talk about that one.
Yes, so down payment assistance homeownership is an area that we truly are lagging in our, and we've been impacted, I would say, mostly by staffing in this area in terms of getting some of our homeownership work going. We do have our contract in place with Community Home Trust that is operating our down payment assistance program. And the challenge that we're going to have now is this is a really tough market for home buyers to find a product that if you are at 80% of area median income or below, and that's our eligibility threshold, it is really hard to find a home that you can afford. So we are watching that program and working very closely with our partner to see if we need to pivot and make changes as we go along to make it possible for homeowners to buy homes. That is really, I think, the primary activity that we have here is the down payment assistance program. And we hope to see our first purchases happening next year as homeowners are able to, as we knock wood, that homeowners are able to find affordable product.
Thank you. And Karen, could you just do the eviction diversion and we'll close with that one?
Yeah, so eviction diversion, that is an ongoing contract with Legal Aid of North Carolina. We are currently in the second year of a 3-year contract with them. That's that 1.545 number that you see there. And we are envisioning that that contract will end at the end of calendar year 2023. And we expect that we would enter into a new contract in 2024. But that work is proceeding. It was also impacted by COVID because of the eviction moratorium. Legal Aid continued to work with people, but what we saw was a lot of cases basically being frozen because evictions were frozen, and now we're seeing a real unfortunate uptick in evictions. And Legal Aid doing everything in their power to keep people in place, but we're going to see a spike of evictions this year because landlords are in the process of evicting people who they couldn't file on during the moratorium.
Thank you. Tiffany and Diane, what I propose is that we conclude here and then we'll pick up at the next time. And then the other document is actually the units provided and the services provided. And I want to be able to go through that one too. This is just a financial document right here.
Right, but for reference for people, if they do pull up the other one, the row numbers correspond, even though that takes more space to get to it. The headings are the match, so you can directly see what the expenditures are supposed to cover. So that'll be very helpful. Thank you. We can entertain a few more questions if anyone is interested at this point. Karen, can you mute? Thank you so much. I don't see any hands raised. So if there are no questions or further questions, I thank you both very much. All of you, Terry, Karen, Reginald, this is really great information. It's the nuts and bolts and really important. So thank you. At this point, I'll turn it over to Tiffany to talk a little bit about subcommittee engagement, and then we'll do probably about 10 minutes for that, and then we'll move to public comments. We do have 7 or 6 attendees. If any of you want to comment, we'll get to you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for that info. That was quite comprehensive and very helpful. Just wanted to go back to the conversation on subgroups and the topics that individuals mentioned that they were very interested in doing a deeper dive on. And it's taken a moment to sort of pull together the idea of how to implement subgroups for this committee, but we have received confirmation that the subgroups might want to consider, the specifics of which will be forwarded out to you. Thank you, Juliet, for sending that info over. The subgroups will need to be, well, first of all, the subgroups, of course, are volunteer. It's not a requirement of this committee. Those of you who stated an interest in doing a deeper dive on topics are welcome to explore those and sort of shape what that conversation looks like within the parameters set forward by the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee as a whole, and our charge. Another thing to consider is that we have confirmed that they must be run similarly to these meetings. So they would have to be a public meeting that would be organized through the clerk's office. There would have to be someone leading that meeting, taking minutes, bringing that information back. So it would be more of a formal process as opposed to an informal sort of subcommittee meeting. And we were looking into additional information on how those meetings would need to be set up, because staff assistance for that would be very, very, very limited, if available at all. And that's something to consider. So, and again, the subcommittees are self-forming. We're going to be shooting out the information on the groups that you all said, or on the topics that you all said were of interest to you, so that you can, pull together with the names you see on there for people who have similar interests and figure out how to set the groups up. But wanted to put that out there again, since forming subcommittees under this committee is a more formal process. We wanted to make sure that all of the T's were crossed and I's were dotted, and that information was available to get to all of you. But if you have any questions now, definitely questions or concerns, feel free to ask. Other than that, the info we've gathered will be forwarded out to everyone moving forward.
Tiffany, I think you had suggested that if people wanted to get together over the summer, since we aren't meeting in July and August,
yes,
and then ideally report back to our group in September.
Yes.
But certainly questions can come up between now and then. And right. Okay.
Perfect. That's it.
Were there any questions for Tiffany or on this process? Tiffany, would it be helpful to see a show of hands from people if they are still interested in pursuing subcommittees, or now that you know the requirements of such, it's perfectly okay if people don't want to take this on? So I think I will ask, actually. Okay, so I'm seeing Venus and Nicole, so I'm assuming you are still interested. Is that what we're thinking, the hands raised?
I just had a question. I had a question.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Because I was interested in doing site visits, if it has to be more formal, like with taking notes and making sure that this is documented in some kind of way, I'm not sure exactly what that would look like.
Yes. Understood. And I cannot answer that question as of yet right now.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
And
so if you don't mind, I'll elaborate. So if we were going to do a site visit to, let's say, Willard Street, and the committee wanted to do that, what we would do would advertise that and say the committee was going, if it was a majority of the members. If it was just a minority of the members, we can organize that. So that's what it's for, because we don't want you to be, unless you want to be, have a meeting. And so there's a process for that. So site visits are a little bit different than having a meeting where you're discussing business.
Okay, that makes more sense, because in my mind, I was like, I'm not sure exactly how this works. And I can't remember how many people were interested in site visits, but I will raise my hand for still, being a part of that committee.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Right now we have 14 members, so I think if we stay under, well, certainly under 7, but under 8, we should be okay in terms of not having a quorum and not needing to advertise. But perhaps, Julia, you can confirm that with the clerk. And we may choose to do site visits twice and keep the groups smaller so there can be some discussion. I will say Laura said she is still interested in subcommittees, and Tim is saying he'd be interested in site visits. So it does look like there's still some interest. And I know there was another hand. Give me a second. Did anybody else have any other comments on this?
I see Nicole has it, or is the hand still up?
Nicole's hand is still up.
I
and
apologize. I'll put it down.
Courtney's saying she's still interested in site visits and subcommittees. So sounds like perhaps when people respond to you, Tiffany, they can be very specific about roles they're willing to take on in terms of leading a group or taking minutes or communicating with the clerk and advertising, all those things. So well, thank you all for your interest. Great. All right, at this point, if, oh, thanks, Lucia. See you later. At this point, we can move to public comments. So we have 7 people. Well, sorry, one of them is Laura that had some contact trouble. So if any of you are interested in speaking, sorry, Juliet, why don't we let them all in and then I'll recognize them by hand. That's probably the easiest way to do it, right?
1 second.
Okay, great. Okay. We have roughly 10 minutes for public comment. So, okay, a few people have.
Everyone should be in.
Okay. I'm now only seeing 3 people, but are any of you interested in commenting at this point? Philip Azar, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
For a few, I want to thank you for recognizing me. With our focus on units coming on, and also the point was raised that with long-term affordable units and permanent affordability, there's sometimes need for subsequent subsidies. Is there a way for the matrix that Mr. Johnson referred to not only show units coming online, but units rolling off and the expected cost of maintaining affordability? I don't think we would need to really reserve that number and count it against any budget. But before we did the last bond, it seemed like at least the affordable housing community, advocacy community, lost sight of the cost of preserving affordable housing. Second, I would just say, and this gets to the idea of the AMIs, my impression is that the housing bond was very much passed in part, large part, on the narrative that we would help long-term, low-income residents of Durham, particularly people of color. And we should be, I think, tracking overall how we're doing against that, and by provider, how we're doing against that. I understand legally we can't steer. There are constraints around what we can do, but when city council acts in a legislative capacity, they might want to know who's doing a good job. And the community overall want to know how we're tracking against that goal when we look at a subsequent housing bond, if we do in fact look at a subsequent housing bond. And then lastly, in terms of costs, I would assume we're tracking costs in any number of ways, by AMI, by provider, by city and county funds, by total costs. But there's also in the, I think it's the action plan, there's this overall statement that—
Time is up.
Okay, I'll leave it for another time. Thank you very much.
Did anyone else want to comment? Juliet, I still see 3 people as attendees that didn't move in as panelists.
I keep promoting them to panelists, and for some reason they aren't coming. So I'm not sure if they can control it on their end.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. I'm willing to give Philip another minute or two.
Okay, how much time would you like?
Well, it's 2:02, and then
Okay.
we'll see. Thanks.
I think
Go
I can
ahead, Philip.
definitely keep it under that. So in costs, in the action plan, we've always had this statement that affordable housing must be material in all ways and appearance to market rate housing. And when we did Southside Rolling Hills, it got into stainless steel appliances, marble countertops, which were of course used potentially big cost drivers. It seems to me what we're looking for very much is the idea that affordable housing should not be in any way stigmatized. But there's a lot of costs that may exist between the gap between non-stigmatizing housing and housing that's identical in all regards to market rate housing. And then there was another, I think, member of the task force that also talked about materials and more innovative ways of building things. But I think we need to be much more open-minded around those things. So thank you very much. And I really the extra time.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions at this point? All right, seeing none, I'm going to remind everyone that the next meeting is Thursday, September 1st, followed by Thursday, November 3rd. And that will finish, I believe, finish out our meetings for this year. And Reginald, can you clarify? I thought I heard you say that we will get an update to those financial numbers after the end of the fiscal year, so sometime after June 30th. And you're on mute.
So no, actually what I was saying was that we will have actuals for that column that said FY22, but I'll have to talk with the fiscal staff about when we would have those. So it wasn't an update to this entire document. It was an update on the actuals, because we have to go through the process of closing out the year. And so what I was saying was what we had planned for FY22 that was budgeted for that year. We'll know what the actuals are, but that's a closing out the year process.
Okay. If people are interested in looking at the numbers, I always refer people to the AHEC presentations and meetings for details, but is there another place on the website that these numbers will be highlighted? I know, or is the best place to do the deep dive into, I mean,
so if somebody has questions, we haven't put these numbers on the website yet.
Will we be doing that?
Yes, we will be doing that, but we have not yet. You all have them.
Okay.
And we've discussed them with the city council as well and shared them with the city council. But yes, we will be putting them on the website, but it's a process we need to go through with that. But if anybody has any questions or wants to discuss them, I'll be glad to do that between now and the next time we meet. One of my concerns was that this was a lot of information, and for those who may not, look at it every day, it still may be confusing. And so I'm willing to meet with smaller groups or individuals or talk to help with that and help facilitate that.
I appreciate that. I do know that people are interested and starting to ask questions about what's been spent and where. And so I would encourage us to put it on the website with caveats and cautions, but as soon as possible. So I appreciate that. Let's see.
Madam Co-Chair.
Yes, please,
I think
Juliet.
Mr.
Sorry.
Johnson may need to know they are on there. Every presentation that we have from the meeting is automatically posted on the website. So the numbers are there. And if I need to take it down, I need to be informed.
This is the question that I have. This is Terry. Diane, what website are you speaking of? Are you talking about the Forever Home Durham, or are you talking about the cities?
No, I was talking about Forever Home Durham. I tell people to go to the partner site and then go to the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee and then to look by meeting date where all the presentations are posted. But I was hoping that it might go in a less buried place. That might be a little easier for people to find.
Right, and I understood that that was your question. So the minutes from this meeting and the report from this meeting goes on the website. Now, and Juliet will do that, and she says she's already done. I understood you to mean a more prominent place on the Affordable Home Durham website.
And just to let you all know, as it relates to the actuals for the closing out of this year, the books do not close until the latter part of July. So we will not be able to start pulling actual numbers in until beginning the first week of August. So I just want to give you all a little time frame about how long that will take place.
That's helpful. Depending on what else needs to go on our agenda, perhaps we can revisit this at the September meeting and do an equally deep dive just to see where we're at. So that'd be great. Tiffany, did you want to share anything else?
Actually, no, I think we're covered. Our next meeting, September 1st. You will receive a follow-up by email on the subcommittee topics, and hope everyone has a wonderful summer. Stay safe.
Great. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Councilwoman Hyman, for joining us this evening. So